And good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another live Xanadu Gallery Art Business Academy online critique group session. Today is Wednesday, April 28th, 2021. It is good to be back here with you on a Wednesday morning to share some art, talk a little bit more about the art business. I'm especially excited to have our guests today, Joe Saberi, who, Joe, I think I've got you here. I may have you on mute. If you want to go ahead and unmute, we'll pull you into the session. There we go. You unmuted and I muted you again, Joe. Sorry about that. There we go. Got you. Good morning, Joe. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, Joe, let's begin with just a little bit of background and how you came to be creating the art that you're creating.
My background is I went to art school, which I guess these days is a technical school. Anyway, I had a good portfolio when I came out. I spent a lot of years, in fact, I still am, as a commercial artist. And that's been a blessing for me, and then it's been a curse for me transitioning to the fine art side, which is why I'm here.
Yeah.
I feel lucky to be a dinosaur of sorts. I know the traditional side, and I also know the digital side. In fact, I still have a marketing company. So I like to keep my hand in both. I have made a transition. This is my office. This is my studio, all in the same thing. And we can do that because of the technology involved. I spent a lot of years on the commercial side, transitioning to the fine art side via National Watercolor, American Watercolor. That used to be called editorial art. And you saw it in magazines, and that was kind of the gray line. And as far as I'm concerned, Stan Freberg said it, it's art for money. To be crass about it, it is.
Yeah.
So it depends on what you want to do. And I have found that as far as my own rewards, I really enjoy paying it forward. I really enjoy teaching. And I enjoy that aspect of it. It's great to see the light bulbs go on, and I don't care whether it's me. As you well know, you could have told somebody, a student, this 5 times, and then they read a book, or they take a workshop, or they watch a YouTuber, and they come in with this, hey, I got this great idea. This is blah, blah. So I don't care about any of that.
And so talk a little bit about more about that transition. How have you managed, and you mentioned that you're still doing some commercial and marketing work. So yes. How have you kind of shifted your or created your fine art studio practices, and how has maybe the well, I don't want to steal your answer, but has the discipline that came from the commercial side come over to the fine art and had an impact on the fine art work that you're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, definitely it has. Besides knowing both sides, the traditional and the digital, and NFTs, of course, are hot right now. So everybody's going to do a crossover with that. Yes, the discipline, I have done thousands of storyboards. What do you have to have if you do storyboards? You have to know how to draw. Number one, I don't care about technique. As far as I teach water media, mostly watercolor, mostly transparent, some acrylic, but it starts with the drawing. And to me, that's the biggest thing of all. And the second in my little trilogy is design. I am a designer more than I am a painter. That's execution to me. And the third thing would be desire. Are you passionate about it? Do you want to do it? That's the key. You gotta want to do it. And I'm very curious. I really like the journey. I like the lab. In fact, that's what I call this place, the lab. I'm not afraid to fail. I embrace failure. There's power in failure. There's power in frustration. In fact, I call it funstration because I'm doing something that I like.
Well,
So,
excellent. Well, let's jump over and look at some of your work and kind of
okay.
take a little bit the discussion over there. And let me see if I can get us up here. Here we go. And so tell us a little bit about your process for kind of discovery of subject matter and what's interesting you and how that then kind of translates into the work that you're producing.
When I first started to be interested in the fine art side, it was due to Nita Engel, which some of you may know. Some of you may have her book. She was great. She's the one that taught me how to paint transparent watercolor, and she and I had the same backgrounds. We were both art directors in Chicago, and she started doing her own finish, which was great. And it was editorial art at that time. So we became good friends, took 3 workshops from her, and I still do take workshops. I also, of course, give them, but I still like to take them because I always kind of learn something, a different point of view. Uh, I I tried, as most people when they're starting out, I painted like Nita Engel for a couple of years after I started taking her workshops until I kind of found my way after what she taught me. And I'm too old right now to paint like her anymore. It's too tedious. I'm over the masking. And so then I started to kind of coming from the commercial side, what will sell, what won't sell, uh, what's interesting to me. And this series I happen to like very much. And this might look, oh, that's an easy thing to do. But this I found design wise is the most difficult part for me to combine those 2 images, those 2 shapes, image within an image, and try to make it work. Um, and I've had some reaction from that. This, I like Noton. I am a Notonizer. That's a great app, by the way. You can get it for your phone. It'll tell you when your painting's done, and it'll tell you if you're going through mid-tone crisis because there's no place to look. You didn't leave white paper, and you don't know where to put your dark, so you put them every place. So these are all ink first, waterproof ink. And then you apply the color, and you can make it any mood, any atmosphere, any time of day, anything that you want. And I did have an article in Watercolor Artist magazine doing this ink first technique a couple of years ago. This is one I'm fascinated by right now. These are acrylic inks. To me, it's still water media. It's still watercolor because I can get all these textures. That's what fascinates me about water media. I am not good enough to put down every brush stroke. And I like to be surprised, and I like risk reward. And it's a piece of paper, or it's a board. All these things that happen just fascinate me. And I still, after doing it for decades, I still get excited about it when this happens, when all those, that pigment granulates and mingles. This is my Nita Engel phase. The top left is from a workshop. I stood up in a canoe on one of her workshops. That's the Gold River. And that is a lot of masking in there, and that the bottom, that gorge, is kind of the same period, and so is the one on the lower right. The others are I would tag them as more traditional, and of course my family thinks I'm on crack because it doesn't look like this stuff anymore.
Yeah. So, Joe, let me ask you, and it's a conversation that I frequently have especially with water media artists, but with other artists who are maybe working in media, pastel, media that's not oil or acrylic, basically is what it comes down to. Is there's this perception that, well, it's harder to break into the fine art market in these
Oh, yes.
media, to get a following, to sell the work. And so when you were considering kind of getting into fine art, what was it that drew you into water media, and what has your experience been as you've kind of tried to build a career around that work?
I agree with you. As a gallery owner, your wall space is very important, and what you dedicate to, and you can go down and say, okay, what's the most saleable medium? And you go down the list. There's sculpture, there's pastel, there's oil, there's water media, watercolor. And yes, I agree with you. I think watercolor has always been kind of undervalued, and that's not me, that's centuries of tradition, because the fine artists always did their comps in watercolor, and then they did their finals in oil. But Sargent is a good example of that. I love his watercolors. If you want to learn how to paint, if you want to learn how to see, just look at Sargent's watercolors. I got off subject. I forgot your question.
Well, yeah. So what has your experience been then, taking that, watercolors and showing them, and the reaction to the work, and, what do you perceive to be the advantages and challenges?
If I'm in a gallery that has a variety, like your gallery, it has a variety and you're very smart doing that, and it interests people. So they're going to connect, they're going to walk, they're going to connect with something, an artist or a subject or a style, and or a medium. And I do most of my connections, i.e. sales, direct, and it's usually to people that are painting in the same medium. It's not because necessarily of a subject, it's other people who paint in water media, watercolor, because they want to know how to do that. And I always try to, there's a myth about water media, especially watercolor, that you have to do it right the first time. It's the hardest thing there is to paint and all the other. And I think that's BS, because I come from the commercial art side. I know how to fix anything because it's due at 9 o'clock in the morning. And I am not a watercolor West person. Whatever it takes to make a good image, a piece of art, I will use. I will use pastel. I will use Sharpies. I will use colored pencil. I will use gouache. I will use anything, collage. I will use anything to make a good image. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does. And I think that, and when I'm having this discussion, typically it is with someone who's a watercolorist, or, as I say, a pastelist, or some other medium, gouache, where the sense is that they have chosen a higher hill to climb in order to find an audience, and to be able to start generating sales. And I don't, I'm not totally disagreeing with that perception, that it is a little harder to break into the market when you're working in those media, to an extent. But my question is always, when I'm getting asked that, well, if I tell you that it's hard to sell watercolors, or pastels, or any work behind glass is another one that I hear frequently.
Yep.
Is that going to stop you from doing it? Are you going to change to be an oil painter if I tell you that? And of course, universally, the answer is no, because there was a reason you chose those media, and a reason that you're expressing yourself that way. And so it becomes a question then of, well, maybe I do just have to push a little bit harder. And what we found at Xanadu is that, as I've introduced some of those media into the mix over the years, and I've never been afraid to try different media. And I'm showing watercolorists now, and I've worked with gouache artists and pastelists, and my wife Carrie and I love those media. We have many works in our own private collection, and so we're not, just because it's a little harder doesn't mean we're not going to do it. But the other thing is that we found that we have some collectors who get very excited to be doing something different, as we can have a conversation with someone who maybe hasn't bought a watercolor before, about what you can achieve with watercolor that you can't achieve in other media. They become very excited about that. And so, Joe, what have you, what have you kind of done in that regard in terms, or what do you find is most helpful when it comes to attracting people to the work and maybe even educating them about the process?
Well, I think it's the style. I think it's the freshness. I think it's whatever. If you go back to that slide that you were just on, this is recently the older, at least the older I get, the longer I get in the career path, I get less and less interested in representational and more in the emotional or the mood of it. And watercolor, water media makes me a better artist, because I only have to paint half a painting, i.e. Nita Engel, and let the watercolor paint the rest. The biggest cause for failure with students is they try to do too much. They want to keep touching, they want to keep fixing, they want to do this, that. This painting on the right-hand side, that is only about 4 by 6 inches. And the reason I'm saying that is I have always wanted to take that and blow it up to 6 feet. And you cannot do it because of the physics of it, because of the hydrology, because of the pigment, the particles of paint, the microns. You cannot do that. So if you'll bear with me for just a second.
Sure.
I took that, and this is, if you can see it.
Yep, we've got it.
Yeah, this is one I blew up because of the technology. And I can see all the things that watercolor gave me. I can see the blooms, I can see the granulation, I can see all that stuff. And it's just fascinating to me. I do not know, this is an inkjet, it's a giclée. And you know that area. So is this worth anything? I don't know. It is to me, because this is the way I want to look at watercolor. I want to see all those gifts that it gives me. And I am not afraid to try those. In fact, they're very popular as far as workshops go. But how are you going to sell something that's 6 by 4 inches? You're not.
Well, we can do it. We've sold some smaller works, but boy, you're right. I mean, you think about the work that goes into those smaller pieces, and the price that you need to ask for that work, and you really have to start thinking in terms of different dynamics. Let's jump and talk, and let me just pull up. I wanted to quickly just talk about your presentation and the way you're framing the work, and talk about that a little bit, how you came to develop what is a clean and kind of contemporary presentation for the work, and what drew you to that look.
Honestly, National Watercolor drew me to this work. They had framing requirements. I have never spent a lot of money on frames. In fact, Aaron Brothers was my friend before they went out of business. And I do not let, as a designer, I don't want anything to get in the way of the art. So I keep it very clean. I give it a wide space. And to me, that presents well. I've got a whole wall behind me, kind of showing that. There's enough separation that I can look at each piece individually, even though they're spaced closely together. So NWS was an influence. The one of the issues with that is it is no longer under glass. Even during the pandemic, where everything is virtual, before that, it was having been on the board and run some exhibitions, the traveling show for National Watercolor, glass is death for shipping, for anything like that. So they're all plexi, which is, from my viewpoint, very cost effective. I'm assuming that, frankly, I'll be crass. If somebody wants to put that over their couch, they're going to frame it with their decor in mind. And I will give a framing allowance.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point. And yes, we do see some of that. Although I will also tell you, and I'm actually taking a watercolor piece out to a client this morning. I'll be heading out there after this session. And what we've actually found, and very simply framed like yours, dark molding, very clean contemporary design, matte. That actually most of our buyers just keep that. If they were attracted to it in the gallery, unless they have some overarching compelling reason that they need something more ornate, most of the time the way they see it in the gallery is the way they're going to end up buying it and hanging it and being happy with it. And that's not to say that certainly some artwork kind of calls for a more ornate or more detailed frame,
right.
and that can work as well. But ultimately, we find that most of the time our clients, they like to keep the buying process simple, and they tend to trust the artist. Well, if the artist thought this looked good, it must look good. And I'll also say I do have some artists who ship their work to me behind plexi, and we will mention that to the client. And if you want to change it, you can. But most of the time, the client ends up hanging it in their home behind plexi as well. Again, unless there's just some compelling reason to make a change there. So it's an interesting dynamic for sure to see how that works. And who's to say maybe if we had a different frame on it, what impact would that have? Would it draw a wider audience? And sometimes we'll experiment a little bit with that, but most of the time, clients like to keep it pretty simple. Now, I would like to bring in our audience, our group here, and hear some of your reaction to Joe's work. I'm especially interested in those of you who are working in water media or other media outside of the oils, but anyone who's here obviously can hop in. Joe, you've got another comment to make.
well, here's my dilemma, and here's why I contacted Jason. Uh, I come from the commercial art side, and I said that was a blessing and a curse. I was able to ape a lot of different styles because it was due the next day or it was due in 3 days. Uh, and I am all about discovery. I'm ADD, like probably some of you, and I love the discovery. So I'm always trying things. I get obsessed by something and I move on as soon as I find out the magic. So consequently, I have at least, this might all look the same to you. To me, they're all different. I have 6 different styles or techniques or whatever. And my original intent was, okay, what should I do more of for gallery sales or for whatever? So that was my intent for this forum.
Yeah, and that was definitely something I want to focus on here. I noted in the email that I sent out yesterday announcing this and on the page that we're really I want to focus on especially the question of consistency across the work. So yeah, let's draw some of you in. How do you feel? What's your response to the work, and how do you feel about the consistency across the different pieces that we've seen and are seeing on the screen here? Does the work feel cohesive, and can you kind of create a narrative there? And if you want to hop in, you can click on the hand icon or throw your hand up in front of your screen. And if I don't get volunteers, I will volunteer you. Let me go to Rebecca Grove first. Rebecca, if you can unmute yourself. It should, if you scroll over the screen, you'll see the little red microphone that you can click on, or you should see an ask to unmute now. There we go. Now I've got you.
Joe, it's just so exciting to see your work because you are bold. You are so bold. It's wonderful. I like to work this way, and I find it very exciting. And as you talked about, I'll use anything that's in the room. I pick things up off the floor and put them in, and I add all kinds of things. And I just love. I don't have a lot to say other than it's so wonderful to see such great bold work. And I like the fact that some of them look like a series and that they're paint. I love the way you mix colors on the painting. I love that. That is a style that I like to do myself. Anyway.
No, and it's interesting because as I got some comments in ahead of time, submissions on the forum, that was a lot of the response that I was seeing. The work is very interesting and exciting, I typically there will be some commentary on consistency. I didn't get a lot of commentary there because it was just much more focused on the work itself. And boy, that's not a bad place to start when you've got people who are seeing the work and feeling excited about it.
I'm not sure that being consistent is I mean, I know that you'd say that we have to have a consistency. If we're in a style, it is consistent of that style that you're working in. But I was trying to do the horse with something I'm doing now, and I thought, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah. Well,
Anyway.
let me get some other comments in. And I guess let me ask this question: is the work consistent? Let's start there. Do we see an inconsistency across the different pieces that we're seeing? Argue with me about it a little bit. If I were to say, oh boy, there's some consistency issues here, would you agree with me or disagree, and why?
I don't seem to have the raised hand icon, and I'm on
Doug, I see you there. Hop right in.
Okay, great. Yeah, sorry, I don't have a computer. I don't have a camera on this desktop.
That's okay.
Yeah, Joe. So, I am all watercolor, strictly watercolor painter, and I do see your issue. I see your question. These look very different to me. The styles are very different, and the ones that use what you described as more leading towards feelings paintings, or which I would say are beginning to abstract. Those look really unique. They look really, very organic to you. They really don't look like anybody else's watercolors. Those to me are very distinct in style from the other ones. The other ones, do look very different. They, I can see in the Homeland section what you were going for, as you were influenced by her, the workshops that you took with her. I see, the landscapes, and they're beautiful. I mean, you're just the the brush skills that you have, all the skills that you have mad skills. But as you venture into these more feeling paintings, I feel like I'm looking at something very special.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Doug. Let me go Jennifer Zapp. I think I've got you here, and then I'll go to Tina.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Joe. I've taken a few of Joe's workshops and stuff, and he's such an incredible artist, and so giving of all this knowledge. I think the thing that ties together the most for me is palettes. I think his palette is very consistently feels very. All of his work seems like it. Almost everything except for maybe the undersea one feels like it fits in a similar palette. I guess I have the same question that Joe mentioned about the working small and how has that become marketable, and is that a place where we can go for with that?
Good. Yeah, we will come back to that because it's a good point. But so I've got from Doug a sense that there's some range and difference. Jennifer's mentioned the palette helping it tie together. Let me go to Tina And Tina Schmidt, if you want to hop in, what's your feeling as you look at the work? Should be asking to unmute there. And then I'll go to Shirley.
Okay, I'm unmuted. There we go.
There we go.
Hi. So I actually turned on to Joe's work recently, and it was exactly what I had been looking for in helping pull something out of me. I have a commercial background as well. This is one of mine behind me. And I come from a very, I guess, a left-brained kind of art where everything has structure and form. And Joe's work really showed me this amazing, spontaneous aspect of the spirit that I'd been trying to tap into myself. And so I started taking lessons with him. And what I noticed is now that I've kind of seen his process, I can look at all of these pieces and I can see that they're all Joe's, and I can see the consistency, the essence of his style, and the color palette, especially. That color palette is there in here. But it's just something that, you know, maybe at first glance you don't see it because it's like looking at, oh, I don't know how to explain it, but it's there. And the more I look at his work, the more I can see the same thing. The action in that wave on Homeland, I can see if I can see that in the boundary of the diver. And it isn't because of the wave versus the underwater look. It's because there's an essence of that, what I've seen in the brushstrokes that Joe does, that makes me appreciate the fact, the full gamut here.
Yeah, and so that's a really interesting point, Tina. And you know, in my gallery, as I'm kind of thinking about showing an artist's work, and as I have a grouping of new work come in, it is a consideration to kind of think about how the work interacts with the other pieces that are around it, how the work will show together, and what you talked about: will the work as it's showing in a grouping kind of resonate together and not have any particular piece feel like it is an outsider, that it doesn't, it isn't cohesive with the other pieces, or feels like a little bit of a shock. And so that does take some thought. And I do want people to be able to recognize and identify an artist's work. And so sometimes, even though you can point to a variety of differences between the pieces, it's also helpful to kind of think about what is it that ties it together. And before I give my responses to what I see when I'm looking at this work, let me go to Shirley. And Shirley, you're going to get the last word, the last initial reaction.
Does that mean I'm going to be right? No.
Yes.
I've worked with Joe for several years, and what's been exciting to me, as I was a relatively new artist when I started working with him, and now I'm doing it full time, is the sort of the willingness to take risks, the willingness to make mistakes, the willingness to try new things. And so to me, the consistency is less important than the taking this amazingly solid background that he has and then just striking out. And in a lot of the works, you can see the combination of a good solid base, but with the energy and the willingness to experiment, and as Joe says, to make mistakes. And to me, that's what I like about the work. The consistency is less important, although there's an underlying consistency of high quality. Yeah. But reaching out and just trying a lot of different things, and letting his emotion kind of come through. It's been interesting, as a student and just as a fellow human being, to watch that evolution with Joe over the last few years. He's obviously a much better, more experienced, more talented, more draftsman-like artist than I am, but it's really quite inspiring. And when I look at the work, I just think, who wouldn't want to buy this? Particularly the more experimental pieces, the imaginaries, and some of the other things. To me, they're very exciting. Just,
Yeah,
why?
and so Shirley, you raise, I think, a couple of interesting points and important points when we're talking about consistency, and it's what I run into whenever I bring out the word. There is this sense, and you can almost see the fear come into an artist's eyes when I say consistency, because they're afraid that what I'm talking about is having to start creating a cookie cutter,
Yeah.
assembly line kind of output, and that every piece is going to have to be very closely similar to the piece that came before it, the piece that comes after it, and that's not actually at all what we want to achieve when we're aiming for consistency. And as I look at Joe's work, yes, I do see some variety in terms of the subject matter. And there is even there are even some technical differences in terms of some of the approach to technique in some of the pieces. But underlying all of that, as a number of you have mentioned, is I think some very strong thematic elements that help tie it together. Some very strong, kind of baseline compositional and again, the medium, just having a mastery of the media that are being used that help tie the work together. And then, boy, it sure helps to have a very cohesive, consistent approach to the presentation and framing of the work, where even though it's very small, as we look behind Joe, and let me hop back out so we can see each other here, and we see that wall of work with the dark frames and white mats. To a certain extent, you start to get some latitude to have a variety of different subjects and approaches, just by virtue of the fact that they're all presented similarly. And so as a gallery owner, I don't know that I would feel that there is a consistency problem that we need to worry about as we look at these pieces. I could draw works from even different groupings here, and feel like I could show them together. I probably would want to have a couple of pieces from each of the groupings to start to create a little bit of a flow across the work. But like I say, there's just that strong technique and underlying proficiency in creating the work that shows through and helps to tie it all together as well. I don't see a consistency problem here, and I would see and I would encourage reaching out and talking to some galleries, because I am convinced that you would find a ready audience among gallery owners who'd be interested in sharing your work with their collectors. And because you've got a variety of subjects, you could potentially reach out to galleries in a variety of markets and really increase the exposure that the work is getting, and consequently the sales. Now, I do, Joe, want to ask you about a couple of aspects. One is, we've mentioned a couple times that you are a signature member of the National Watercolor Society. How did that come about? Why was it important? And what impact do you feel that membership has had with your work, and that you're doing, kind of the trajectory of your fine art career?
Well, it came about through many, many years of rejection. Anybody who's ever been to a show, go figure.
Yeah.
You cannot figure it out. So don't try to. Just put in what you like and see how it flies. And that could change from year to year. National Watercolor has gotten extremely difficult to get in because of the amount of entries, especially internationally. There's at least 1,500. They're taking 80. So don't be disappointed. As far as my career, having initials behind your name have not increased sales at all. It has increased awareness. It has increased my value as a juror or a workshop instructor or things like that. But as far as individual sales of art, no. And I have talked to several other people, and the articles in magazines, Splash, et cetera, they generate some interest, but forget about the sales. It's very difficult. I'm on Saatchi, I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube, I'm on all the other things. Forget about it. It's a showcase to get people interested. Very little sales. As
Yeah,
far
which
as
all of that certainly can play in ultimately to kind of bringing, I mean, the exposure creates interest, which
yes,
creates viewers, which ultimately can then be cultivated into sales. But I'm interested to hear you say that, and I would echo it a little bit because I do get a lot of questions about the importance of belonging to professional trade groups and having signature status. And um, anyone who's asked me that question knows that what you're saying is an affirmation of what my typical response is, and that is that it can have its own value.
yes,
And certainly as an artist, sales are not the only motivation. And sometimes having the recognition of your work by your peers,
yep,
and
validation.
that can be its own reward. But I wouldn't say that it's an automatic ticket to fame and fortune.
No, it's a marketing. It's marketing. That's all it is. That's what I treat it as. It's
And
not an online store.
yes, and so and again, that's not to say certainly there are some collectors out there who will respond to seeing the initials after your signature, and that can be an added benefit. But if they weren't attracted to the work in the first place, that alone is not going to do it. And somehow we've managed to blow right through our time for this session, and we've gotten an opportunity to look at your work and talk a little bit about the consistency. I think I would, though, just in closing, you mentioned, Joe, that you're doing teaching. We have a number of your students who have joined us this morning. And what was it that initially attracted you to teaching, and what benefits do you feel you get from having the opportunity to teach?
I get more out of. I learn more than my students. I learn what works, what doesn't work. Every time, a lot of times I'll do demos and the student work will be better than mine. And I'll tell them that. I hate you. Uh, I don't have, I'm egoless from that standpoint. I just want to share. I just want to promote I guess, the art of doing. Don't talk about it, just do it. And I think water media gives me the most, it's the medium that gives me the most opportunity to discover. So.
Well, awesome. And Joe, if members of the critique group want to follow you and keep up with what you're doing, what's the best way for them to do that?
JoeSiberiWatercolors.com is my own kind of website, and on there workshops are listed, classes, et cetera, et cetera. Or just email me at my name, joesiberi@mac.com. I'll be happy to share.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Joe, thank you so much for joining us for this session. Thanks to everyone for being here. And if you are new to the online critique group, the best way to keep up on what's going on, we meet here every Wednesday morning, same time, same link, same place, but also hop over to red.blog.com where you can sign up for our email list to get notifications about the upcoming sessions. I'm running out the door to go take some artwork out to a client's home, so I do have to leave us, but thank you all so much for joining us. We'll be back here